Hello and thank you for joining me today. I'm Jan Clothier of Thinking Stamping and I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator based in New Zealand. So today I'm going to share with you how I made this card, which I made for the colour challenge at Colour Inspiration, where I'm a team member. The colours that we had to work with today were an interesting set of colours, very autumnal. We had to work with sweet sorbet, early espresso, cherry cobbler and crumb cake. So I decided that I'd make crumb cake the base of my card and that the other colours kind of lent themselves to being an autumnal kind of colourway, and so that led me to Soft Seedlings, which is one of the sets from the July to December mini catalogue. I love it because it's got that beautiful distinctive look, so you get beautiful fine etched lines from it. Anyway, I also liked the sayings in it, thinking of you, so grateful for you, and hello. Anyway, and you could use any of those sayings for this card, but I've gone with thinking of you. So we'll start off with what we need to make it. So I've used early espresso as my card base, and I've cut it 10.5 that way, by 29.6 that way, and scored it at 14.8. Now that's a standard size card base for me, so if you're not a metric person, then just use whatever your standard sized card base is. So an early espresso base. I've got two pieces of crumb cake, one for the front and one for the inside. And they are cut at 10 by 14.3. And again, if you're not a metric person, just whatever your sort of standard in a card base would be. In addition to that, I have also used a little bit more crumb cake. And what I've done with that is I have stamped the sentiment in early espresso and then cut it out. Now I used the beautiful shapes dies for that. Which have just seemed to have disappeared off of my workspace, but anyway, it's one of the dies from Beautiful Shapes, and I kind of like that beautiful little etched edge it gives you, but you could use whatever shape you like, and if you don't, you have a die cutting machine, you could just cut a tag and maybe fishtail the end. Anyway, so you need something to do the sentiment on. And the other thing that I did was I took a piece of crumb cake and I stamped just the head of that image, and I did one in Cherry Cobbler and I did one in early espresso, and I did the little helicopter in sweet sorbet, and then I fussy cut them because we're going to do something else with those as the card progresses, but you need some crumb cake to do those on and a little bit of time to fussy cut them. Okay, so I started off with the crumb cake and the beautiful stamp, and you can see what I mean about that lovely etching that you've got going on in these distinctive stamps. They're just beautiful. The negative of them, if there is a negative, is that they do, if you've got a very juicy stamp set, they do fill up with ink, so you have to be a little bit careful about how you stamp them. If it's a very, very inky stamp, like a new one, I would press it down with an old piece of plastic so that there's not so much ink sitting on the surface. But if it's not a very new inky stamp pad, you don't have to do that. So I'm going to stamp in early espresso, and because I want a bit of variation on that, I'm going to just rub off the ink from the seed heads, and I'm going to get a sponge dauber and some sweet sorbet, and I'm just going to dab the sweet sorbet on that. And that's the other thing you can do if you have got a real problem with a very, very inky stamp pad and you're just not getting a good impression. You can actually use a sponge dauber or a blending brush. Sorry, a sponge dauber or a blending brush to do the whole thing. Okay, so now we're going to just stamp randomly, and because I want the ink to transfer, I am going to just count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and lift. And so now we've got the beginnings of our beautifully variegated foliage. So we'll do another one in that kind of colourway. So before I clean it up, I was going to clean it up and then I changed my mind, decided I'd do another early espresso. I still want a bit of red in it, so I'm going to just brush the ends of that Gonna come back with my sweet sorbet. I haven't wiped off quite as much this time. And I'm also just going to dabble just a little bit in there, just so I get a little bit. And because I don't want it too inky, I'm also just going to pat it with my blending brush just to kind of push any extra ink down. Okay, and then, press. It's a little bit like Forrest Gump's box of chocolates. You never quite know what you're going to get when you do this, so we'll see what happens. Nice. Now I'm going to clean that up with my wet wipe. Give it a bit of a pat dry because I don't want any dampness on my next ink. And in fact, just to double check that, I'm just going to press that just to make sure it's nice and dry. Now I'm going to come in with some crumb cake. Ink it up. And just in case I've got a little bit too much, I'm just going to pat it with, because I know that my ink pad there is just a little bit, it's a little bit inky. So we'll see what happens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And we'll do another one up here. I'm not going to do it this time and just see if it gets a difference. I think it'll be a darker impression because I haven't tapped it. But we'll see what happens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes, nice. I like that. And I feel like we need just a hint more red. So I'm going to do another little one there. And I also think that I need a little bit more sweet sorbet. So I'm going to just get the little helicopter seeds. Oh, I don't know what you call them, but at school there was a big sycamore tree in the playground, and when these things came down from it, we always called them helicopters and raced out to play with them. Okay, and perhaps we'll just have a little bit there. Okay, so now I've managed to include all of the colours, which is nice. Obviously you could do this with pretty much any colourway that you wanted, but this one is, this colourway is growing on me. Okay, so now I can attach this to my front, which we'll do. And then we'll get on to the fancy stuff, which is around the cluster for the sentiment. So, would I like it that way? Would I like it that way? I think I'm going to do it that way. Okay. So, we'll just centre that. And you know, the nice thing about glue, if you've listened to me before, is I do like the wiggle room. Just gives me a little bit of time to straighten that up. Now, we're going to add in the sentiment, but first of all, we're going to take these leaves that I had already stamped and fussy cut. So that one's in Cherry Cobbler, that one's in Early Espresso, that one's in Sweet Sorbet. And what we're going to do is I'm going to emboss them. I'm just going to clear emboss them and make them a bit shiny. So I'm going to, not going to bother with the embossing putty because I want that powder everywhere. So we're just going to get the Versamark and give it a bit of a squash. And then I'm going to pop it into my clear embossing powder. Get in there and swish it around a bit. Yep. And I'm just going to pop away and emboss those, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now I've embossed them, and you can see two things have happened. It's given it a nice shine, and it's deepened the colour. You can, if you want to, what I've done on that one there, you might be able to see that that one is very shiny. I actually went back and I embossed that one twice, and you can see it gives it a real thick look. That one's only embossed once. So if you want to add in a bit of extra oomph, you can actually pop Versamark back on them and then give them another layer. That also gives you a nice effect. So now we're almost ready, because the other thing that I've added in to my cluster is this lovely metallic ribbon. Now this is the Sweet Sorbet metallic woven ribbon. It's 1/4 inch wide and it looks like that. However, what I've decided to do with it is to, so I seem to have misplaced my scissors. Oh, I have to get out the kitchen scissors. Get a couple of bits of that, and I'm going to get my pokey tool, and I'm just going to tease it out. So that instead of being a solid 1/4 inch, oh, 1/8 of an inch, whatever it is, wide, it turns into this lovely kind of interesting mesh instead. And I like that look. I think it's a nice, gives you some nice sort of frayed texture rather than a solid piece of metallic ribbon. So we'll just plug away at that. The pokey tool, or the take your pick if you've got to take your pick. This is what we had before we had the take your pick. And whatever you use for poking out your dies is good also for pulling apart bits of ribbon. So I'm going to get my Stampin' Seal, and I'm just going to put a couple of bits down because I want to use that to just attach my bit of ribbon so that it's just there, clustered in the background. Oops, I don't think that's quite how I want it. Let's see. That might be a bit much. Let's just go back. Okay. Let's just, first of all, let's just see what happens. So I suspect that's too long and I'm going to have to trim it. Yep. So that's what I'll do. I'll get out my old kitchen scissors, seeing as how I've obviously left my lovely snips in the other room. Okay, we'll just tease that out a bit more. Yep, and pop it onto the Stampin' Seal. Now we need our embossed leaves. Now I haven't glued all the way to the end because I actually want them to look lifted off the page. I don't want them to look like they're totally flat. You could use dimensionals, but I'm going to use dimensionals on my label and I don't want the whole thing to be too high. I suppose you could also, if you wanted to, use some more Stampin' Seal to hold them down. But I did find once I am pressing down on it so the glue's got a chance to start setting. It was enough to hold it. Now I'm going to pop that on there. So that's already raised up, so I'm just going to put dimensionals at that end because I think the leaves are doing quite enough lifting for me. So I'm going to use the dimensionals and a bit of glue at that end and pop that there. And I'm going to get my little helicopter. Oh, that one's quite big, isn't it? I think you'll look all right. I see what I did on that one. What I did is I cut one of these out, but what I've done for this one is I've stamped that one, which you can see is a bit bigger. So I think it will still work, but I'm just going to orient it a little bit differently. And we'll pop him there. Oops. Bit of a glue disaster. And actually that one is going to annoy me, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back. I am going to put a dimensional under him, because if I don't, he's just going to sit a little bit too free. Okay. Now, the very final thing that I did was I used some embellishments. So, coloured gems, I used some of these brushed metallic adhesive dots just to give it a little bit more of a lift. So you could use the pewter ones if you liked. I could use anything really. Champagne rhinestones would look quite nice, I think. Where will we pop that one? I think over there. Okay. So there we have it, with slight variations. The Soft Seedlings Autumn card, made in Cherry Cobbler, Sweet Sorbet, Crumb Cake and Early Espresso. If you have seen anything that you've liked and you'd like to buy it from me, there's a link to you live in New Zealand of course, there's a link to my online store in the end card and in the description under this video. If you liked what you've seen and you haven't subscribed to me, please subscribe. And as always, I'm more than happy to answer questions, and there's a link to my blog and to my Facebook page at the end of this video and in the description below. So, happy stamping!